Monster Hunter World has a very simple premise. There's too many dangerous monsters roaming the land and you need to go and hunt them down. And over the course of the game, you end up hunting a lot of them. It's not unusual for playtimes to easily pass the 100-hour mark. To keep your attention for that long, the designers created a hugely varied roster for you to fight, with each monster having its own unique qualities and abilities that ramp up in both power and absurdity as the game progresses. Eventually, you'll come face to face with Fatalis, the last monster in the game and the ultimate test of skill. But instead of having a unique design that tries to outdo all the other ones that came before it, Fatalis looks, at a glance, pretty mundane. It's a good design, don't get me wrong, but at its core, it's just a dragon. There's no unique design elements, and no Monster Hunter specific ones either, to the point that you could take Fatalis, drop it into any other piece of media, and it wouldn't really look out of place. But while this might make it sound as though Fatalis might come off as feeling a bit generic or forgettable, in reality it's anything but. It feels incredibly fresh and incredibly memorable, and probably ranks highly on my list of the best boss encounters of all time. And in this video, we're going to talk about why. The first element to understanding how Fatalis manages to feel unique is to examine how monster design is handled for the rest of the roster. There's a lot of monsters that look like this, and you could be forgiven for thinking this is some kind of dragon. In actuality, this is called a wyvern. You can spot the difference between a wyvern and a dragon by counting how many legs they have. If it's got a set of wings and 4 legs, then it's a dragon. If it's only got 2 legs, then it's a wyvern. This isn't some universal rule though. There's plenty of media that call creatures with only 2 legs dragons, like in Game of Thrones for example. Generally speaking, wyverns look a bit more anatomically realistic than dragons. After all, we can see numerous examples of forelimbs evolving into wings for flight in nature today. And this is how the developers of Monster Hunter approach creature design. They have a lot of fantastical elements, but there's some core of realism running throughout them. A story from Paul W.S. Anderson, director of the Monster Hunter movie, illustrates the level of detail present in these designs. When he showed footage of the movie to the game's developers, they stopped him to point out a mistake in the design of Diablos. Anderson had the fingernails looking too pointy. The designers told him that because Diablos burrows through sand, it would have evolved to have more rounded fingernails instead. And with this we can see where Fatalis first starts to stand out. It completely ignores this realistic design convention. Unlike some of the other monsters, it's hard to imagine what kind of environment would have caused a creature to evolve this way. It only really looks appropriate in the ruined castle it's fought in. The taxonomy of Monster Hunter loves its wyverns. We've already seen an example of a flying wyvern, but we also have bird wyverns and brute wyverns. The idea of this was to create this concept of a shared evolutionary history and taxonomy. Tigrex and Rathalos look different at a glance, but it's fairly easy to imagine them having a shared ancestor. Fatalis explicitly does not fit into any of these pre-established categories, and thus you can't really picture it having any shared ancestors with the rest of the cast. We the audience recognise it as looking like a traditional Western fantasy dragon, but the people in the Monster Hunter world don't. This recognition of something familiar in a world that has such a clear and established taxonomy creates this image of Fatalis as something unnatural, as if it's invaded this world from another one. And this is why Fatalis feels unique. It's not despite its simplicity, it's because of it. Or rather, it's because in the context of the game, this is not any kind of simple, generic design. It's unique amongst its peers, a monster that doesn't fit in with the rest of the world. The other creatures feel like actual living animals, and the title of monster can sometimes feel a bit excessive, but for Fatalis, it feels wholly appropriate. But of course, this statement is only really true of the first Monster Hunter game, where Fatalis really was the only design resembling a traditional dragon. In later games, the classification of Elder Dragons saw plenty of new entries, with designs like Kushala Daora striving to fill the same niche as Fatalis. Elder Dragons are often given outlandish design elements and features to emphasize their power compared with the rest of the roster. Look no further than Valstrax the Jet Dragon, or the incredibly alien-looking Xeno'jiiva as examples of this. And while these design elements do create memorable encounters that stand out, Fatalis still ends up coming out on top. To see why, we'll take a look at how his fight actually plays out in Iceborne. So we've seen that the strength of Fatalis' design is in part due to its simplicity, and this concept is also true of how the fight plays out in Iceborne. Before we get to that though, we should first take a look at how some of the other hunts play out. The vast majority of monsters are found in one of the large locales, and before you actually start the fight, you have to hunt them down. The game is called Monster Hunter after all. Once you've fought them for a while, they'll run off to another area, and you'll have to take stock of how you're doing, make some preparations, and then hunt them down again. This happens several times over the course of the hunt, and creates a cycle of intense action, followed by retrospect and preparation. But Fatalis never leaves the ruined castle it's found in. The other monsters exist in a natural environment to simulate the whole hunting experience. Fatalis exists in an arena where the intense action of combat never ceases. There are 2 points in the fight where the player has to hide from a devastating flame attack, and these brief windows are the only times the player can experience the retrospect and planning stage of usual hunts. Simplifying the hunting mechanics in this way puts the focus solely on the combat mechanics, and ensures that you have to be on your A game throughout the entire length of the fight if you want to be successful. And in these combat mechanics, we can see simplification. To illustrate this, we can have a look at Elatrion, the elder dragon the player has to hunt before they can face Fatalis. Elatrion has some of the same design concepts as Fatalis. He resembles a traditional dragon first of all, which also differentiates him from the rest of the cast. But that's where the similarities end, because the actual Elatrion hunt is anything but simple. To begin with, he has control over all the elements in the game, and will cycle through them over the course of the hunt. In order to succeed, you've got to observe and react to these accordingly. And I don't just mean that in the sense of learning how to avoid different elemental attacks. This design element is directly incorporated into the very mechanics of the fight. At the start of the quest, he'll be in either fire state or ice state, and you can learn which one by the title and description of the quest. He has different elemental resistances based on what state he's in, so if he starts in fire state, you should bring an ice weapon for maximum effectiveness, and vice versa. And you need to do this because if you don't deal enough elemental damage to him in a set time limit, then he runs to the center of the arena and does an unblockable, unavoidable, instant kill attack. He'll do this attack even if you manage to reach that elemental threshold, but now its damage will be reduced so that you're able to survive it. The elemental threshold will then reset and you've got to reach it again, otherwise next time the attack will be an instant kill again. This cycle repeats for the length of the fight. But there's even more to the complexity. If you don't break his horns when he's in that first state, then he'll switch to the opposite elemental state after the big attack. That means if he started in fire state, and you brought an ice weapon to counter that, succeeded in reaching the elemental threshold to survive the big attack, but didn't break the horns, then he'll now switch to ice state, where your ice weapon now won't deal any elemental damage. This overlong description hopefully gets the point across that the Elatrion fight is pretty complex, despite also focusing purely on combat mechanics by having it take place in a single arena. This kind of mechanical complexity often shows up in other powerful monsters. For example, the fight with Shara Ishvalda has 2 distinct stages, which play very differently from each other. Safi Jiva has mechanics that reward all players in the multiplayer lobby for completing shared objectives, as well as having gameplay mechanics like specific player aggro. So given all of this, what unique gameplay mechanic does Fatalis have? Well, it actually doesn't have any. There are basic cannon and ballistae dotted around the arena that the player can use, but they don't need to be used to win. Twice he'll fly up into the air and do a huge flame attack, and the player has to hide behind specific cover, but this is mostly to give a moment of respite to prepare for the next stage. If you haven't broken the head before the second attack, then he'll come back down with blue flame instead of red, which is much more powerful. You can still break his head at any point after this though to reduce the power of the flame back to red. It's not an instant fail state as with Elatrion. And that's it. There are elements that the player needs to consider and plan for of course, but far less than in some other hunts for monsters of a similar power level. By not introducing any new or monster specific mechanics, the hunt has a laser focus on the fight between the two of you. With no distractions, it becomes like a dance, the back and forth of dodging everything he throws at you and waiting for those small opportunities where you can go on the offensive. It's exhilarating and incredibly difficult, and it's this joint concept of simplicity between design and gameplay working together that creates a very memorable encounter. It doesn't need flashy visual elements to impress or intimidate you, its actions are more than enough to manage that. Any excess complexity has been stripped away to create a monster that tests you on nothing more than the core combat mechanics of the game. Towards the end of the fight, the Dragonator is unlocked for use, which is a huge drill-like weapon activated by pressing a button. These are often found in the arenas of giant monsters, and when activated they usually always cause Proof of a Hero to play, which is a triumphant song first heard in Monster Hunter 1. Subsequent games created new renditions of this song, adding elements and remixing parts, usually to match the feel and evolution in each new game. When you activate the Dragonator in the Iceborne Fatalis fights, however, it's not Monster Hunter World's rendition that plays, it's the original Monster Hunter 1 rendition. It's most likely for nostalgic reasons, being that Fatalis was first introduced in Monster Hunter 1. But more than that, this original version also shares in the overarching theme of simplicity. There's no choir and no enhanced or remixed sections, it just doesn't need them. It's stripped back, simple and to the point, completely synchronized with the rest of Fatalis' visual and gameplay design. Every element of Fatalis embodies simplicity, but the result is anything but forgettable. It stands as an example of how simple ideas and concepts can feel incredibly unique thanks to the context that they're placed in and how they come together. It's the ultimate test of skill and a fitting end to Monster Hunter World and its expansion Iceborne. And after no doubt failing time and time again, when you finally do bring him down, that feeling of incredible accomplishment solidifies Fatalis as one of the best monsters in the series, and one of my all-time favourites.